Welcome to Black Economics TV. We have with us today Lynda Howarth. She is the owner and co-founder of Perfect Reception, and she's going to tell us quite a bit about what she does and give some advice for running a business as well. Thank you for joining us, Lynda. How are you?
Very well, thank you. More importantly, thank you very much for inviting me. A little nervous, but very excited
I
to
don't know
to
why
be.
you're nervous. Goodness, it's only me and you here. Why are you nervous?
Yeah, well, I come from a performance sort of background, so I'm used to talking in front of a lot of people. But obviously, my business at the moment hides me behind telephones, so it's
Okay.
been quite adjustment since about 2018. So yeah.
Tell me about your business.
Okay, so Perfect Reception is primarily a telephone answering company. Okay, so we provide that service to other businesses, so business to business services. So number one, telephone answering service. Number two, outbound calls, which is quite unusual. So we can make calls on behalf of any company within reason, what they would like us to do and say to their clients, whether it be booking appointments, medical questionnaires, etc. Live chat and email management. So just all about being able to help a client save time and be efficient in that way.
Okay, brilliant. So tell me about the heights of your achievement with this business.
Well, with this business, it's interesting actually. This business started as a little sister, so to speak, to my previous businesses. So I think it's the heights of the achievement is to make it stand on its own 2 feet. Previous to Perfect Reception, I ran a chain of gyms. So I had 10 gyms, 5 beauty suites, online supplement range, and all the sort of branded stuff that went along with that. And Perfect Reception was an answer to a problem that I had. How do I keep high levels of customer service, but keep my wage bill under control? Otherwise, you have to have a receptionist sit at the front. And 9 times out of 10, she wouldn't be necessary. But you would have to have somebody there just in case. So it's that just in case bill, if you want to call it, that we allow customers to lose. So the height of my achievement, I got my previous businesses through COVID, which was, fun, shall we say, and interesting and challenging and so on. Being able to put in technology to make them more profitable coming out of COVID than they were going in, and at the same time turning my attention to this sort of little sister business that I had set up for myself and letting it grow, letting it blossom into having, sort of over 250 clients and being able to really help other companies. And it's now my full-time work baby, as I like to
Very
refer to it.
fantastic. So, if you own 10 gyms during the pandemic, you must have suffered quite a bit during that crucial time.
Right, right. Interesting times. So honestly, Dawn, I remember. So gyms, as I'm sure you're aware, they're open all the time. There's no so well, they're certainly open for long periods of time, 7 days a week. There is no such thing as a day off as a director or an owner in the leisure industry. And and then Boris closed us down. The rumors were
Mm,
out, but nobody really believed it would happen. Or it might happen for like a day, a week, a month, worst case scenario. And I remember the day after, he closed this all down, and I sat in my lounge. I think it was 1 a.m. with a cup of tea, just not knowing what to do.
mm,
Just
mm.
just such a bizarre situation. When you make sure that you have all these plans about what should happen, what could happen if so and so left and this happened, and we had a new product and it didn't work or we didn't hit target. You have all those plans. This was not a plan. Didn't have it,
Yeah,
Dawn. not a,
yeah, of
you know,
course.
I'm not embarrassed to say. I mean, I have it now, but I
Yeah,
didn't have
yeah.
it back then. So it really taught me, I think, resilience in another way. You know,
Mm.
Absolutely. To have your whole business world just turned upside down on a single sentence on the news. I mean, I don't know if how it affected you, but you weren't informed, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas if your team members, your staff, and I employed about 100 instructors and so on, cleaning staff and so on at the time, sort of the transition of concern and worry that, well, Lynda, you must know. You must know. What
Yeah.
are they planning? What's Boris going to do? I don't know. The
Yeah.
council don't even know. Like, and all you could do is sort of wrap an arm of reassurance around people, but you couldn't give guarantees. Remember, there was no furlough at that point. There were no business loans. There were weeks of nothing, just this
Yeah.
absence of information, holding people, and telling people just hold on, just trust me that I will do the best that I can possibly do. And I think, again, I look back now about some of the decisions that quite often other business owners have told me off for, have sort of commented on, shall we say. You shouldn't be so accessible to your staff. You shouldn't maybe be so involved or take personal calls whenever, and all that sort of thing. But I think in moments like that where, you know, the poo hits the fan, it really is important that they understand you as a business owner, because you're dealing with people's livelihoods, you know.
Mm.
And that was reflected on to our membership base, who were actually amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was the slight irate person, but most people just used to, that's business, right? But
Yeah.
most people were sort of like, right, okay. And I think, again, just reflecting about communication standards, getting something out there, being honest, being transparent. This has happened. We're unsure. However, please keep an eye on this email address. Please keep an eye on posters in the gym windows, and so on and so on. And yeah, and so that's that. Sorry, I'm probably digressing, Dawn, but
No,
yeah.
that's fine. So tell us, with perfect reception,
Mm-hmm.
you said you started it while your other business was going, and it was to
Yeah.
help your previous business.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful that you have so many clients now.
Thank you.
Would you say that it's more lucrative? Would you say it's an easier business than having a gym?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
I think partly if people have owned, previous businesses before, different types of industries, I think there's something about a business to business company service
yeah,
that there is the boundaries already set in place. Whereas if business to consumer has an added complication
yeah,
of,
definitely.
particularly in today's world, it became more and more, exposing is probably the wrong term, but social media means anybody can write anything about anybody at any particular moment in
Oh
time
my goodness, yeah.
without any fact checking, without any realization, and it can really affect people's businesses. Whereas if I
Mm,
find the expectations can be clearer with business to business, I think
yeah,
the politeness and expectation of contact is another thing. But and it's telephone answering. People like to think it's a simple service. In one way, I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, that's nice, girls on phones," and I was like, "Oh my goodness me!" Firstly, let's not even get into the general sexism of the statement,
mm,
but in terms of, no, that's fine if you wanted to do it, in my personal opinion, slightly amateur. If you want to
mm,
be professional, which is what I'm offering, I have to
mm,
know about that company. I have
mm.
to know background information so that I don't sound like some sort of lemming robot,
Yeah,
without the full picture. The caller should not know that I'm a telephone answering service. So that's who they've got through to.
yes.
And they can do that by slight nuances of what my team say, how they say
Mm,
it, and having knowledge. One of the ways that I make that happen more, Dawn, is to make sure that we divide into teams, even if those teams are really, quite small for the first, so you've got sort of the law team or the accountancy, you've got trades, and then there's sort of IT specialists, and then hospitality and retail. Again, if you're calling the help desk of an online retailer, you've got to know about your product. Otherwise, you can become frustrating. You're frustrated as a caller, and that's the last
mm.
thing you want.
Yeah.
I know a disproportionate amount about posh boiling taps, for example.
Okay, okay.
Always replace your filters. But yeah, so other companies, do they go to that level of detail? No, I think that's probably a side of my obsessive personality, about detail. That is,
Mm.
which I'm sure drives my team crazy, but they just have to put up with it. That's that.
Okay. So tell us some of your client success stories, businesses
Um,
you've worked with.
that's all right. So I was just saying, so we had an online retailer of children's stamp manufacturer, so to speak. It's really lovely, joyful business, and it's a very, very good product. And they had a celebrity go on GMTV on the morning slot, and without notification, just hold up their product and go, "I use Stamptastic. It's amazing," and it just went crazy. Imagine having that advert
Oh,
without booking it. Imagine
wow.
not trying to get an influence, an influencer and all that sort of scenario. I mean, it was priceless.
Mm,
And the owners, you know, again, just sort of this sort of text message, Lynda, can you cope? And it was obviously you've got because I have to balance my switchboards as something called sort of call loading, call volumes, how many calls per minute per second that I expect a day.
mm,
And so just saying, look, don't worry about it. We'll do our absolute best. Running around, rigging up spare computers, spare laptops, pulling, callers in off holiday, just going. And it's not my business. I could have said, you know what, that's not in your call package. We'll do our best, thanks. I could have said that. But what I see is an opportunity for another business who's been wonderful to me. And, I want to do the best for that company and
mm,
absolutely pulling out every stop, every live chat
mm.
answered. I mean, in the end, it had so many that I had to get, because you normally can run about 32 live chats simultaneously at any one point in time. So that could be various different companies and so literally having to get sort of like downloading the apps on their mobile phones and trying to do that and just running it so that you could have even more simultaneously and taking the orders for them, processing them, updating the Shopify at the back end, getting the order, all that sort of stuff. So that's a wonderful moment that you see with clients. It's happened a couple of times. When teams go down, I had one
Mm.
client spend over. I think he said to me, "Linda, you saved me 30,000 because we're an overflow."
Wow.
Yeah, we're an overflow service, and they I can't talk about we're overflow. So i.e. the call rings in their office and then it comes through to us. So they did big promotions, big sort of Birmingham NEC display stands, etc. And then they came back on the Monday. So they did that on the Friday, I think it was like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, got all their leads together, all that lead collection work that they did, their sales team did. And then when they got back, their teams went down. So their telephone lines went down. So basically, yeah, they all their calls then came our divert number holds, and so therefore all calls came through to us.
But that's interesting because I really thought that people weren't using phones that much now for business. I thought it was all emails and texts, and I'm quite
No.
shocked that people are still calling and making orders and things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, even Google would say 70% of people, if they're halfway through thinking about doing a transaction or doing business with somebody, will will call them. It's
Okay.
just to know that I think a lot of it, Dawn, to be honest with you, is to know that they can,
Yeah.
and then all correspondence thereafter goes onto sort of email and so on. But that
Okay.
feeling of trust and reality and
Yeah.
your gut feeling about if you're going to work with another company, if I'm calling my lawyer, my accountant, I want to know that I can get hold of them.
Hmm.
Even if I can't get hold of them, that particular person, that representative, I want to know that that company will always answer, because you send an email, somebody doesn't reply, does it go into spam, all that sort of thing. In situations that are stressful can make people nervous, such as if you're going through a court case, you
Hmm.
know. And so a telephone answering service in that regard for the professional industries in particular is really helpful. I think as well, the statistic that people are surprised at is that 79% of people, if you go to voicemail or if you don't answer around the 3 to 5 ring mark, will just terminate the call and never call back.
How much? What percentage?
79% of people.
You're kidding.
So you go, well, actually, you're right. You might only get. I've got company. My smallest client has 3 calls a month, but each one of those calls is worth 250,000 potentially.
Oh,
That's her average contract deal, right? So for her, the idea of paying somebody to sit there and look at a phone for 40 hours with the idea that may or may not ring for a whole week is crazy, right? Being able to hold somebody responsible for answering that phone when it does ring because of the high value of the call is really important. And so therefore you can see why an external outsourcing to an external telephone answering provider makes sense.
yes,
Um,
yes,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah. And if you're going to spend that amount of money with somebody, I want to know I can speak to them. that,
Okay,
you know,
okay. Well, I think it's interesting because you also have an outreach team for your own business, and that's how I
yeah,
came across you because somebody
yeah,
reached out to me on LinkedIn.
yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was a really good method of starting a conversation about somebody dealing with calls for your business.
Yeah.
And it's not just a case of accepting calls on behalf of a business, but I think what's also quite fascinating is that you make sales calls.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a telesales part of
Yeah,
the business is where you can make, I
yeah,
don't know, 100 calls a day on
yeah,
behalf of somebody. And
yeah.
we
That's
know
right.
that sales calls can be far more effective than an
Mm-hmm.
email.
That's right. Again, because they've got the personal touch. So that comes from that service, we call it outbound calls, just to separate between the inbound and the outbound team, really,
Mm,
different set of offices. But comes from my background in gym sales. That that what that industry is very sales driven and it's very call driven because
mm,
you're business to consumer.
yeah.
Um, and lots of chasing, lots of all that. And I had the tech already. So it came really, originally it started from other clients asking me, hi, Lynda, I don't suppose you could call these. I think the first ever outbound call client was an accountant asking us to chase invoices and to chase information for VAT returns. Because you can send as many emails as you want as an accountant to somebody and say, hi, please don't forget to send me this. And by the way, you've sent me all these payrolls except for June. But it was just not getting anywhere because their clients are busy. And
Mm,
so I said, of course, let's start with the call. And then it grew and it grew and it grew. Um, and it's a really popular service. It's a really
mm,
popular service. I think I didn't maybe appreciate how much people dislike making outbound calls, particularly. I mean,
mm.
you gotta have thick skin, right? You've got to not care. You've got to be hung up on, and you've
Yeah, yeah,
got to
yeah.
have, I return back to this word again, but this resilience of just picking up the phone again. I do that. We don't. We got headsets. I feel like that Peter Kay sketch was it? But yeah, just literally calling again, not being put off, going back to script, being cheerful. Irritatingly cheerful if you're the person sitting next to an outbound caller, as in you can never um, you can never drop that. Somebody's paying you
Mm,
to be that.
mm.
So that is what you
Yeah.
must do. You must represent that company in a positive way. And that person on the other end of the phone can't know that they're call number 47 of 300 and whatever that day.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
possible. That's not
Yeah.
all right. So staying fresh and never and always having that, there's a sort of optimism that comes with it all, where you have to, when I'm training the outbound callers, you don't know, just like when you turn around the corner of a road, right? You turn the corner, you turn right, you turn left. You don't know if the love of your life is around that corner. You don't
Mm,
know if,
mm,
you're gonna put up a 20 quid note, whatever it might be, right? It's the same with outbound calls. The next call's the one. The next call's
mm,
the one.
mhm,
That's got to be your mindset. And of course, the more you have that, the more it actually happens. The more experience you have, the more that actually happens, because you're refining the sales skills um,
mm,
of what you're doing. And again, knowing your product. You're not normally expected to sell the product, if that makes sense, on the phone. You're booking the appointment or you're taking an order of something they've already received information about. But you do need to know, you need to be able to sort of answer enough
Mhm.
to, and if you don't know the answer, to have the confidence to say, do you know what, that's a really good question.
Okay.
Am I
So,
able to call you back in 20 minutes? Something.
so give me an idea then of costs. If somebody wants to hire you for inbound calls, and maybe they get maybe 2 or 3 calls a day. So give me an idea of that cost, and then give me an idea of the cost that if someone wants to hire you to make, say, 400, 500 calls a week. Yeah? I mean, what's the
Right.
maximum calls you can make per day anyway?
Well, I would just rota on more team members for that.
I see. Right. Okay.
Do you see? And I allow for that within the rotas by pulling off perfect reception work. Does that make
Okay.
sense? So if I hadn't had a booking or somebody booked a slot and it didn't happen, then that would be filled with perfect reception. That's how I do the operations side of things. Maybe not great for perfect reception, but the policy that the client always has to come first,
Mm.
therefore dictates that. Right. So telephone answering packages start at $14.99. So that, the business I was talking about earlier with 3 calls a month, that's it. She doesn't ever go over package. Lovely. $14.99 a month. Includes 10 minutes. That's
Is that
enough.
1,499?
No, £14.99 for 10 minutes of inbound calling a
Oh,
month
right. So you charge per call.
per minute. Per
Oh,
minute.
right. Per minute. Okay.
Per minute. So pretty much all telephone answering companies will charge per minute because it depends on the info. If you charge per call, you won't last very long as a business plan, right? Because, for example, we deal with a lot of clinics, so physios, podiatrists, audiologists, you know, you, that call is much longer. I'm taking medical records, I'm taking, lovely Deirdre on the phones telling me about what she needs and is she an NHS referral, and there's a lot of CRM entry and booking of appointments and rescheduling of appointments and that sort of thing. So believe it or not, your average time though is still below the 2 minute mark, right? If you are a straightforward, say for example, the client is a business consultant, right?
Mm.
And it's a nice, most of the time deals off his mobile phone, but wants to have a landline, which I could provide for him, and wants to look more professional, right? Because mobiles are fine, but they look literally mobile. It doesn't give you the
Yeah, yeah,
weight
yeah.
of professionality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He might be 60 minutes a month, but he would still be on that package because that would be cost effective for him. But his calls will probably be, so the word call and minute in his world, in their world, would be interchangeable because that's about the average length of time that a telephone,
Mm.
because we type as we talk. So unlike most people where you go, oh, hi, you have a little chat, then you might take the information, then you might upload it onto the email and send it over. All that happens simultaneously for us. And
Oh,
everything's
good.
done with the customized inquiry forms to make it efficient. It's
Mm.
weirdly having my calls done, the balance between customer service, so not rushing someone, but yet being efficient, because if the call drags on for too long, your client's not going to be happy because the bill's too high. That is the balance of what we do in terms of inbound. Yeah,
Okay.
kind of with outbound as well. Anyway, versus packages that rise up. If you wanted 500 minutes, £439, that would cover most sort of small, medium sort of size businesses, right? Plus
Yeah.
VAT. Um, we go right up to the thousands and thousands of minutes. When you get to branches of law firms, 4+, you're in the thousands of minute packages. So yeah, in terms of outbound calls, slightly different, because, and that comes down to how you have to resource against it. That caller can do nothing else but deal with your calls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you think the inbounders are, their phones ring every 1 minute and 34 seconds on average, right?
Oh,
On a switchboard.
okay.
So you can have multiple clients processed within a time period. Whereas if with outbound, I literally have to have somebody experienced with sales, reporting lines, CRM differences, familiar with the business, fully briefed, sat there doing nothing else but that one company for that period of time, right? half an hour, so on. So those packages start at £99 for an hour and a half of outbound calling. That doesn't include any of the briefing time, so that's all free. The call reports back, all free. And then all the update conversations that we have as well, free. But again, it depends. Then you can go right up to sort of like 20 hours, which is when I say, let's do campaign. Or if you've got a database that is a complete and utter mess because you inherited it, maybe you bought a business or you have changed your business and you literally need someone to call and go through everybody on that database and update it and upsell while you do it. That's the most common outbound call, I'd say, Dawn, and that is, hi, I've got all these old leads, I've got all these old clients, and I what I hear, of course, when I'm talking to somebody networking, or if somebody's asked to do a consultation about outbound calls, and I just haven't got the time. I just keep meaning I'm going to do something with it, and I haven't done it, and I haven't done it. And then the problem for them is they're then caught in that trap of, it costs more to get a new client, doesn't it? Right? We all know to get somebody to the table is brand new from cold is sort of harder. So I often say to somebody, start with that data. You've already got it. At some point, they expressed an interest, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which takes them from like freezing cold lead to reasonable lead. And you're going to get better. So we can do from cold. We've got many clients but I don't provide data, but buy data and so on, and we just call them and we generate leads for them on that behalf. Of course we do. You will of course have a higher return if they've ever expressed interest before, even if it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, because they've got that familiarity with you.
Yeah, and you've got a softer sale. You've got, hi, we spoke in 1997 and this happened and so on, and my directors asked me to book an appointment just for a catch-up call and see how it is, and etc.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Well, I think that's a great service. So once a person books you, do you take a commission on any sales that you've generated?
No, never.
Okay.
Never.
Okay.
Because my team, and that is quite difficult in regards to, it would be easy to do that. I've got commission structures within my teams, obviously, with the outbounders, right? But it goes across all clients. And how many calls have been achieved, we call it green, how many green they've received. Otherwise, the callers it can become biased. And I don't want that to happen. They have to pay as much attention to booking in a physiotherapy insurance appointment as they do for, selling, let me think, commercial properties or legal work.
Yeah, understood. Okay, well, let's go back a bit. Tell us about your early life and your education. How did we get to where we are now, Lynda?
Oh my gosh, early life. Well, personally, so I am the daughter of a biochemist and a merchant navy captain. So,
oh wow! So you were destined for greatness.
I don't know about that, but as you get older, you learn how these things actually have influenced you quite a lot. So,
okay.
I used to joke when I was asked at school, like, oh, what does your mum do? And I used to say she looks at really, 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 really small stuff, right? In a lab through her massive microscopes. But I realize it's attention to detail and being able to cite everything and being factually correct and so on. I get from her. Being a captain, I think I learned from him discipline, not in a negative way. My father was the softest guy on the planet, but just in terms of hard work and yeah, maybe a little bit of drilling and leadership. I think sort of the osmosis into myself as a child. We lived in many places. I lived in a place called Papua New Guinea, Australia, moved back to the UK. So those things, did they define me? absolutely. I had to learn the skills, which probably comes into the outbound and the sales skills. How do you quickly get a rapport with somebody? If you're a child and you've got a new school all the time because your father's moving around in the merchant navy, it makes you develop those skills. You've got to learn to get on with people really quickly. You've got to learn to be articulate. You've got to learn to, as a child, you want to fit in, those sorts of things. Really not bothered about that now. But at the time. So yeah, and when my father passed away, I think that was the biggest. My father passed away when I was 9. Was the biggest
Oh,
learning curve. Yeah. And
oh,
probably gives me that reflective. I had to learn about myself to be able to proceed in life and to do it positively and to not lose that positive outlook when something, so dramatic and negative happens
oh,
when you're younger. So yeah. Education,
wow.
oh, lots of schools, millions of schools. No, it's an exaggeration, obviously. Lots of schools, and ended up in Bath, which is near Bristol. And
Yes.
because that's where my gran lived, so my mum's mum. So we were out in Australia when my father passed away. So we moved back to the UK so that she could be with her family. She needed that emotional mental health support.
Oh,
And
of course.
yeah, so it was the school that I was sort of roped into. They were great. And I thought I was going to be a biochemist. So I did my biology, chemistry, I did psychology and dance A levels. So that's when the dance came into it. So I was the odd one out in terms of creativity in my family, and I still see that as my joy. I'm director of an international dance charity, the UK
Oh,
side of things,
wow.
for the Language of
Okay.
Dance Trust. And yeah, but quite sensibly, as was the case, they said to me, look, if you have any form of injury, dance isn't very good. And I was good, but I wasn't that good. Mum didn't have the money to pay for all the classes and everything else. Remember, a single parent family now, we spent
Yeah.
a lot of money. We lost a lot of money coming over with the interest rates over to the UK. So I managed to persuade her that I could do a degree, that I could still do a degree, but I could do it in dance. Because I didn't want to be an elephant. I wanted to study elephants. That's the way I described it at the time. And yeah. Oh, but it kind of makes sense. Whenever you say somebody, I didn't want to be a dancer, they're like, yeah, I bet you did. I'm like, oh, no. I was the nerdy one because until that point, I thought I'm going into the sciences. But anyway, so I did a dance degree at Roehampton University, which is a bit random. People don't really expect it, but I didn't do
Oh,
business.
wow. That
I
must have
did do
been fun.
marketing. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Again,
Oh,
really indulged my nerdy, overly detailed side of things, um, and got to be creative all at the same time. Lots of wonderful exposure to lots of great people. But
hmm.
yeah,
And
people
then,
think, oh, sorry, go on, Dawn.
and then from your dance degree, you eventually earned a gym? Or did you have other aspirations? Did you want to be a dance teacher or be
I wanted to be,
on the stage or?
no, not the stage. No, like I said, not an elephant, only behind the scenes. But I, so I wanted to be a movement analyst. Okay, so I am a
Oh,
fully qualified movement notator, on something called Laban notation. If you ever want to fall asleep, Dawn, let me know and I'll send you some details, right? But it's, how you can write music, you can also write down movement, right? So
oh,
before the times of videos and recording and everything else, and even if you record one dance, you were only recording one person's interpretation of it, not what the choreographer wanted. Anyway, I'll stop there because, oh my God, I get so nerdy about it. Anyway, so for me, I wanted to be a choreographer. I think so. I wanted to do sort of movement therapy and things like that, and then choreography if I could. I kind of knew that was a difficult world to crack, particularly if you weren't a dancer first. But I had a sort of quite a lot of amateur experience, and that was great. That taught me how to put shows and businesses together, right?
mm,
How do
mm,
you get people involved, and again started refining those promotional skills, that sort of what I always call the grafting skills, panic about getting enough tickets booked, getting people on the show, getting their agreement, and doing it all with about 20 quid, which is what I had as I left as a student. I was told that I couldn't be a movement therapist until I was 26. So what do you do for 6 years exactly? Apparently I had to mature. I said, oh, okay. So I went and did some dance work, which was obviously great, sort of choreography work, but isn't very good at paying the bills, the mortgage. That's the problem with the arts. So it's a very hit and miss, even more than business. So I went and did some what are called exercise to music qualifications. So yes, I can teach a woo woo class and jump up and down and be in lycra and do all that, which didn't exactly inspire, but did do it. And then I sent an email. I was working in a gym in the sales department because they realized that's what I was good at. So they then they promised that I could teach dance classes, but they decided actually they'd rather have me sitting on the phone doing 100 calls back to back, which now,
Oh,
of course,
wow.
is great. But back then, the management just left me there. They said, there you go. It was a system called ACT at the time, a bit like Pipedrive, Salesforce, all that sort of stuff. And they'd literally assigned me hundreds of new calls every sort of so many hours a day. And that's what I did. But anyway,
Oh,
there we go. There we go. So,
oh, wow.
so I did worked in gyms, and so I sent an email late at night on the late shift to the Language of Dance, and I said, "Hi, I'd like to volunteer, please." And I went, and I also sent to a scheme that doesn't exist anymore called the Trojan Scheme, which was to help children in disadvantaged areas, Balham, Brixton, less disadvantaged now, but back then, areas of deprived neighbourhoods, to help them through movement, help them through dance. So I sent off those 2 emails, thinking nothing of it. And they came back and said, yeah, absolutely. And that's where I met Dr. Anne Hutchison Guest, who unfortunately has passed away now at 103, worked fully to 103. Yeah,
No
absolutely
way,
amazing.
really?
She's the founder of the charity that I am now chair of.
Oh,
Amazing woman.
wow.
Oh, she would have been a cracking interview for you, Dawn. And then,
Oh,
so yeah, such a lovely lady. I worked for her and her husband, Ivor Guest, who was a lawyer. So I started as an administrator, and that's what helped me get into admin for legal companies.
mm.
And so I remember her turning up and she said, "Did you wear that suit for me?" It's like, oh yeah, and she said, "Well, that's it then, you're in because you care." And that was wonderful.
Oh,
And then with the Trojan Scheme, the first class I ever taught had a burning car outside a gate, I think it was Streatham, with
wow.
huge, massive fences. I mean, this class was at 10 a.m. in the morning, and the car is still on fire, and with barbed wire all around the top of it. And it was a primary school. And I remember just being
Oh,
absolutely sort of horrified that children would be in this environment that obviously they felt they needed to have. And they taught me how to wrestle on my orientation. They taught me how to wrestle a child to the floor. I said, I'm not going to need that. And I never needed it. Um,
that's
but
shocking.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is decades ago, but it very much was the case of this is a difficult environment, and you have to keep your eyes open. But I'm a strong believer in prevention rather than cure, right?
Yeah.
If you truly have your eyes open, business, teaching, whatever it might be, leadership skills, you can then see a problem coming on the, not always, but most of the time, see a problem building, and it's that visualization of seeing it as a snowball and stopping it before you put yourself in that situation. So
Mm,
anyway, yeah, so there you go. So that was my early ambitions.
mm.
So Language of Dance was dance for non-dancers. So I then went, do you know what, I want to do fitness for non-fitness, and I sidestepped it with these other qualifications that I had. And opening gyms is much better for mortgages than the dance world.
Okay, yeah,
All the
yeah.
kids and all that sort of stuff.
I
So
hear
yeah,
you. I hear you. That's amazing. So, do you have any hobbies?
still dance, still my
Still
passion.
dance?
Still, yeah,
Oh,
I went to Matthew Bourne's one late the other day. Seen it about sort of 3 times. Like, yeah, absolutely. That, and are children allowed to be a hobby, Dawn?
yes.
They're there. living, sorry, I'm sniffing, I had this cold last week. Living
That's
my
a
life
good one.
vicariously through them. You
How
know,
many do you have?
three boys, three's a magic number. Yeah,
Wow.
16, 15, and my midlife crisis as 8. So
Oh,
what I could have done is opened another business. No, I'm only joking. I love him to pieces. He was very much wanted. But I realize, I look back now and I think I'm one of those people where if there's a gap, I've got to kind of fill it. I'm not a relaxer, you know? Drives my husband crazy.
you know what? I love that where you say, are children allowed to be a hobby?
I really enjoy it. I find them really, I think I'm lucky because I find my boys quite engaging. You know,
Oh,
they've got their own personalities, they've got their own interests. I mean, Herbie did work experience at Perfect Reception.
mm,
Um, Bless him. I mean, obviously, you know, you can't pull a favour that way. What can you do?
yeah.
But watching him grow as an adult really, and then that influenced him. So even though he was just doing data collection and things like that, because I couldn't obviously let him on the phones or anything, but it sparked an interest in law. He's now doing law A level, you know, so you never know where these things go.
Yeah.
Um, and my youngest is the creative one. So I got 1 out of 3.
Okay.
The others are daddy's boys. They're all numbers, numbers, numbers. So
Oh, okay. That's fantastic. So maybe at some point your children might join you and expand the business. You never know.
I never know. I've got mixed feelings about that.
Oh,
There's
really?
part of me that really sort of thinks, oh, that's lovely, like some sort of romantic thought. But then
Hmm.
I've always, which is ironic because the other business partner is my husband, but I always say never mix family and business.
Oh, I see.
But because I wouldn't want them to be in any sort of competitive environment. What you can tell, and what the teachers all say, pardon me, what the teachers will say is that they are commercially aware. They look at the world in another way.
Hmm.
Um, and their equality view of women is very there. Mummy has
Hmm.
always worked. You know,
Hmm.
I used to have to take Herbie, my eldest, round in a sling and work with him as much as I could like that, you know, in the
Hmm.
previous businesses. He was born 15th of April by C-section, and I was signing contracts on the 25th of April. So,
Wow.
yeah, like when you're self-employed, it doesn't stop,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Which has highs and lows. Nobody can tell me that I'm not allowed to take the day off to go and see their nativity or whatever it might be,
Yeah, yeah.
which is wonderful. But it also has its lows that they know that if they want nice things and live in a nice house and that mummy and daddy have to work. But I think it's
Hmm.
about quality rather than quantity of time. And so far, none of them have turned around and said they hate me. So that's a good start. They're
Yeah,
teenagers,
well,
right?
that's
So
good.
I think I'm doing okay. No,
Oh, you're doing good. You're doing good. So, do you do mentoring and coaching of other businesses?
I do on in a sort of passive way, I suppose, particularly with
Hmm.
our startup companies, like we were saying about those very early small packages for people, for businesses. In small ways, they don't always think about the because when somebody comes to me for telephone answering or outbound calls, it's normally because they haven't got time or they've lost faith in their team or you know those sorts of things. Really identifying with them a solution for that, and then how will that solution help you? So with the inbound calls, yeah, of course I can just take a message, yeah, no problem, name, telephone number, da da da, send, right? Or actually, would you like us to identify who is a new client, who, you know, a new prospective client? We should be asking them a different set of questions. How do you track your advertising sources? Right. Well, that can be one simple question on an initial call. Don't you think if your goal is to grow your business, don't you think that maybe, you know, and you have to be super polite to them because at the end of the day, it's their decision. But
Yeah.
maybe we could just, once we've identified if it is a new prospect inquiry, why don't we transfer that call through to your mobile phone? You can then still decline it and say, no, I'm in the middle of Tesco's, I'm not taking the call. That's absolutely fine. But at least to take that further opportunity while that lead is hot. So what I'm trying to politely say to people, you know, I hear, oh no, it'll be fine because, you know, if they're interested in my business, they'll wait 3 days until I get back to them. You think, oh no. No, they're not. They're going somewhere else. And so you say, well, actually, no, what we could do is put in that little bit of urgency where we do, transfer the call, or with the sales side of things, we can send everything back in a spreadsheet, but what you've come to me is a concern about time. So why don't we take a percentage of the time you've booked, which is going to be small because we're doing it anyway, and put it directly into your CRM? One of the reasons why you've got behind with your old leads is because it's not all in on everything you do isn't in on the CRM. So why would you then? Otherwise, you're not going to do anything with the information that we send. Why don't you get us access to an email account or set up a separate one, and we can then send the follow-up information when people request it straight away. So just trying to advise people about operations and how it can help and work for them. Can be the smallest tweak, but sometimes it's the most of, what can be obvious to one person when you're looking at the business from the outside in can be a great, small, helpful tool. A slight change can make a big difference to somebody's business that
Well,
they
I
might
think
not
you give
do.
some really good business advice. Have you written a book or done a course that other people
No,
can learn from you when you're sleeping?
no. When am I sleeping? No, I haven't. No. Look at me getting all embarrassed again. No, I haven't. I think maybe that comes from when I was sort of, you go back a sort of a decade and a half or whatever ago, and I used to try and hide. It's interesting you talk about my background and my past, and I used to sort of hide it. And then one of my employees, my ops manager who's worked with me coming up 10 years, Charlotte, she said to me, Lynda, why do you hire people from arts background, from performance backgrounds? Why do you keep doing it? They can't type fast enough. And I said, because she's techie. And I said, because they know how to do something over and over and over again and be criticized, constructively criticized for it until they get it just right. They know how to bend themselves to what a client wants. They realize it's not them. They must be somebody else for that moment in time. And they're happy to do it. So have I done books and so on? No, I haven't. I think because I was probably embarrassed at that. I probably didn't understand that side of things. And maybe thought that people might not want to listen. Maybe I took enough. But yeah, so I think it was, no, I haven't. I need to grow my inner confidence to be able to say, actually, do you know what? Yeah, I have done decades and decades of business and it is worth listening to. But anyway, your listeners will let us know, Dawn, hopefully.
Well, if you think about Alex Hormozy, that's how he started in business, isn't it? You know that? He had several gyms.
No, I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, that's
Ah,
how he started in business. And look at him now, multi-millionaire. So
yeah. There
you
we
need to
go.
read his book.
I will.
It's interesting because when he started with one gym and then more gyms, and then how he turned things around when things were difficult, and then he sold
Mm-hmm.
that, and then he started helping other gyms and package his
Yeah.
expertise. And look at him now, it's 100
Yeah.
million. I think one of his books is entitled 100 million or something.
Right. Do you know what? I
Yeah.
think that's just because I tend to take those calls for free, always wanting to help people. And you're probably right. I probably
Yeah,
need to
I'm a
address
bit
that.
like that too. Yeah, helping people for free, but you get rewarded in other ways.
You do. And
But sometimes it's a long time in coming, you know.
yes, yeah, that is definitely the case. I do, I'm helping a lot of people sort of structure their businesses and so on, particularly multi-sited businesses, having those conversations with them. Um,
Mm.
I know it's definitely been I know helping people and saving them from bankruptcy and all that sort of stuff
Mm.
in the past. And sometimes just having somebody to talk to that will
Mm.
listen
Mm.
but not bend. Like sometimes you just got to hear some advice you probably don't want to hear, but it is the case.
Mm. Oh,
If you really want change,
yeah,
if you
you
really
sound
want
like
change.
you'd be a really good coach and mentor. So yeah, I'm sure that would be another area you'll develop at some point. But well done with what you do. I think it's really useful for businesses, and I'm sure a number of people watching this, if they're in business, they may be able to check you out. I'm going to put the links to your website and your social media under the
Thank you.
video. so people
Thank
can
you.
contact you if they want to call or if they want to hire you.
I really appreciate that. That would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your wisdom. And hopefully it will motivate and inspire somebody.
Thank you very much for
Well,
having
I know
me.
it will.
Thanks, John.